Can you imagine what it would feel like to have your head instantaneously pierced by high-energy particles from a particle accelerator? When we talk about particle accelerators, the one that most likely comes to mind is the Large Hadron Collider, LHC, at the European Organization for Nuclear Research, CERN, in Geneva. This machine was instrumental in discovering the last missing piece in the standard model of particle physics, also known as the God particle, or the Higgs boson. The terms accelerator and collider give away the basic principle behind these devices. They accelerate particles, like protons, to incredibly high speeds, almost the speed of light, before smashing them head-on into each other. This collision shatters the particles, and detectors capture the traces of secondary particles produced in the impact. This information helps us understand what the initial particles were made of. We know that for hadrons like protons, their internal structure is primarily held together by the strong nuclear force, or simply the strong force. Even though this force only acts over very short distances, on the scale of particles, it is the strongest among the four fundamental forces of nature. Particles like protons and neutrons, which are held together by this strong internal interaction, are called hadrons. To break apart these hadrons, a tremendous amount of energy is required. Take the LHC at CERN, for example. It consumes as much electricity as the city of Geneva to operate. The protons used in its collisions can reach energies up to 6.5 TeV. For heavier ions, like lead ions, the energy can go up to 1150 TeV, or in the peta-electron-volt (PeV) range. At such high energies, temperatures can soar to trillions of degrees, setting the record for the highest temperatures ever achieved by humans. At this point, the particles have been accelerated to 99.9999%. The speed of light. Stephen Hawking once pondered an intriguing idea. If we could build a large enough particle accelerator that could accelerate humans in the same way it accelerates particles, then time travel could become a reality. According to the theory of special relativity, time would move slower for the person inside the accelerator moving near the speed of light. When they exit the accelerator, it would be as if they had traveled into the future. Of course, this is purely speculative. Not to mention the monumental scale that such an accelerator would need to be, which is far beyond human capabilities. Currently, we can only accelerate minuscule particles. As a side note, due to the tiny size of particles, the probability of two particles colliding head-on is extremely low. Therefore, each collision experiment usually involves firing a cluster of particles to increase the likelihood of a successful collision. The energy levels in these particle clusters are so high that they could penetrate anything. Think about it. If even particles themselves can be shattered, what on earth could possibly withstand such energy? If such a terrifying amount of energy were to strike a human body, what would be the consequences? Believe it or not, incidents like this have actually occurred. In 1978, Anatoly Bugorsky was a staff member at the Proton High Energy Physics Institute in the former Soviet Union, working on the U-70 accelerator, the largest accelerator in the country at the time. Functionally similar to today's Large Hadron Collider, LHC, at CERN, this accelerator sped up protons to near the speed of light within a circular vacuum tube. Although smaller in scale than the LHC, it was one of the world's leading large accelerators at that time. One summer day, a malfunction occurred in the detector responsible for capturing collision data from the accelerator. Bugorsky decided to go to the experimental hall to troubleshoot. Before leaving, he notified the control room that he would reach the detector in 5 minutes. Perhaps due to his anxious state, he arrived ahead of schedule. Upon reaching the last door before the detector, Bugorsky found it unlocked. Normally, this door would automatically lock during machine operation. However, the automatic lock had been manually disabled for some reason. There was also a warning light, similar to an "in surgery" sign outside an operating room, but the bulb had burnt out. Ignoring these indicators, Bugorsky opened the door and proceeded cautiously toward the detector. Just as he leaned his head into the path of the particle beam, he was struck by a flash of light brighter than 1,000 suns. At that moment, he realized he had been hit. If it were just a few or even a few hundred protons, the high energy wouldn't cause significant harm to the human body, akin to astronauts who are potentially exposed to high-energy cosmic rays in space. Because such particles are sparse, the risk to astronauts is relatively low. However, large accelerators like the U-70 are a different story. Particle beams in these machines often exist as bunches. The bundle that struck Bogorsky's head contained trillions of high-energy charged particles. Although he felt no pain, Bogorsky knew he was in grave trouble. Remaining composed, he finished troubleshooting the malfunction and logged the incident in the operational record. He didn't mention it to anyone, opting to quietly monitor his physical condition instead. Soon enough, the left side of his head began to swell alarmingly. When Bogorsky described his ordeal to incredulous doctors, they initially dismissed him. After all, radiation of that magnitude could have killed him multiple times over. But when they confirmed his story, he was immediately transferred to a specialized radiation injury hospital in Moscow. Before the Chernobyl disaster, this facility had not seen radiation levels so extreme. Bogorsky was quickly moved to the ICU. In the following days, his skin started to peel off at the area where the beam had struck. His left facial nerves began dying, and his brain seemed to be in a continuous state of burning. Medical staff were mostly preparing to document his anticipated death. Miraculously, thanks to concerted medical efforts, his treatment went exceptionally well. A year and a half later, he even returned to his previous research institute. However, the accident left Bogorsky with lasting damage. Besides dents at the points of entry and exit on his head, his entire left side of the face became paralyzed. He also lost all hearing in his left ear, which was accompanied by perpetual tinnitus. His cognitive functions fatigued more easily than before, and he suffered periodic epileptic seizures. Despite these challenges, Bogorsky managed to lead a life not much different from anyone else's. He even earned his PhD and continued to work as an experimental coordinator at the High Energy Physics Institute.